everyone, welcome to Coats and Jackets, and today I've got Audrey.
Hi, I'm back.
And we're going to talk about some movies again.
Yes, we're going to talk about some really happy-go-lucky, really
Carefree.
feel-good movies. Just kidding. We're going to talk about Lars von Trier's films today.
Yeah, so you turned me on to his stuff.
Yes.
I hadn't really heard about his stuff other than Melancholia sounded familiar to me. Like I'd maybe seen parts of it. And I still kind of feel that way, like I only saw parts of it. But, so you lent me the movies.
Yes.
And I watched at least 2 of them.
Well, honestly, the fact that you got through 2, like, in that amount of time is pretty surprising. They're not happy movies. They're actually quite dark and very unsettling. I have this weird thing where, like, I will literally watch any movie that anybody hands me. But, like, movies that make my emotions go crazy, whether it's really happy, whether it's really sad, whether it's really angry.
Takes a bit out of you.
It takes a bit out of me, but I kind of get a bit of an adrenaline rush on it. You know, like, it really, like, I'll watch a movie and just sit there and think about it and stew over it. You know, like, movies that make me do that, I'm really kind of drawn to, and Lars von Trier has done that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times for me now. I haven't seen all of his films, but there's 5 that have really stuck out to me that I always recommend to people. Like, if you're not familiar who he is, or if you're really interested, you know, watch these movies. But
yeah, I've got a friend who is good with slower paced stuff. Like, it depends on the kind of slow paced, but like I've recommended her things like The Fall and Closer and Broadchurch and stuff like that, right? So like a little more like slower moving, it's about the people kind of things. So I recommended her Melancholia after watching it, actually, because I kind of feel like that would like be along those lines in terms of things she'd enjoy, like, for pacing and content.
Right. The first Lars von Trier movie that I watched that I knew was Lars von Trier was actually called Antichrist. I'll just show you the cover here. It actually came up because, like, I'm a big horror buff. It was kind of one of those films that everyone in the horror community back in, what year was this released? 2009. Everyone was kind of buzzing about it. Like, it's the new Lars von Trier film, and it's quite unsettling, but it's, you know, it's something worth watching, and everyone was talking about it, and I was really, really excited about it. And this was back in the day when we could browse the shelves of Blockbuster. In those days.
Or Jumbo Video.
Yeah. And I just happened to find a copy. It was there, and I said, oh, this is the one that everybody's been talking about, so I'm going to take it home, we're going to watch it. And me and my husband watched it, and I mean, we watched it with our mouths gaping open. Like, the whole thing from beginning to end is so bizarre, and it is, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, honestly, like, we finished watching the film not really understanding what we had just watched. And I remember the both of us just kind of looked at each other, turned off the TV, and then we just went on our separate ways at the house. Like, I remember just kind of not really discussing it other than saying that, yeah, that was really disturbing, I have to say. Antichrist stars William Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg. They're the only 2 people in the whole film, and it's basically, it starts off at this really, I can't remember what the song is called, but it's this really beautiful operatic Italian song that's sung by this woman with an amazing voice. And it's this black and white scene. It's all slow motion, and it's of a couple who are making love. And in the background, while they're not really paying attention to their child that's in another room, the child, very unfortunately, falls out of the bedroom window to his death. Like, that is the beginning of the movie. Like, hello, this is Antichrist, and this is how we're going to start everything off. So it was a devastating blow. Like, the first 5 minutes into the film, you're just like, where is this going? Like, that's crazy. And it was so, like, it was beautifully shot, but it was so depressing and so sad. You know, you're just like, all right. So anyways, the rest of the film basically goes through the character of Charlotte Gainsbourg. I'm not sure what her name was in the movie. She's obviously very very depressed after this. Like clinically, physically depressed. Like, she's hurting physically, she's hurting emotionally, she's hurting mentally. And and her husband, I think it's her husband, her partner, is a therapist, and he decides to take her as his client, which
it's questionable.
Exactly. Like, you're kind of like, oh, I don't know if that's the greatest idea. You wouldn't really want to take on a loved member, or a loved one.
Yeah, especially since, like, part of the point of therapy is being able to talk to someone outside of family and friends.
Exactly. So they end up going to, I guess, is the family cabin, which comes across as like something that the woman, actually I think it was called The Man, the Woman, that's what their characters were called, seems to be genuinely terrified about going to. Like, there's something about it, sorry, there's something about the cabin that she is afraid of, or it's not necessarily the cabin, but it's more the woods around. And he can't understand why, and she won't tell him why. And it's just a barrage of strange incidences that happen that don't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, at one point there's a deer that's in the middle of having a miscarriage, and it's just they're so focused on it, and you hear like kind of like some strange words, and then that's it. Or they come across a fox who appears to be dying in the woods, and it actually speaks to them. It says a few words, something like "chaos reigns," and that's it. So I mean, like, it's an interesting film. It's rather dark, and it gets to the point where the woman's character, she almost, I guess she goes a little crazy. She thinks that her husband's gonna leave her. Like, there was no indication of that whatsoever. Like, he's just been trying to help her. He's been talking to her, trying to get her to get out and like to walk through the woods and get to this point and do this and that. And she ends up just going a little bit nuts, and she physically harms her husband. She knocks him out cold, and she does. I don't even know how to explain this. She doesn't want him to leave, even though he kept saying to her, "I'm not leaving, I'm not leaving." So she physically, like, bolts him down. Like, it's
weird,
but like in the most graphically violent way. Like, it's quite unsettling. You're watching it and you're just like, oh my god, what is she doing? Anyways, he wakes up and manages to somehow get himself out of the situation, which was painful to watch as well. And he's just trying to hide from her at this point because she has gone completely off the rails, and she is just trying to kill him at this point. We still don't know why. We don't know why she's so intent on harming him. And she, at one point, she's so upset, she does some self-mutilation, which is incredibly graphic. I mean, both me and my husband, we both went, "Oh God, no!" we both just looked away. We couldn't handle it. It's like the most horrific thing a woman could ever do to herself. Like, it's it's so bad. I'm not going to go into gross details because I don't think we need to. If you're interested in seeing it, you can just watch the movie yourself.
Yeah, I'm going to have to watch it later because this isn't one of the two I watched. So exactly. I'm hearing this all for the first time.
Yeah. And eventually she comes to her untimely demise. Basically, he's using self-defense. Like, she's just trying to kill him, and he is trying to get her off, and it ends just like that. And then the film ends with all of these like faceless women running through the woods, and then it's over. So of course, like the first time I watched it, me and Dan, we just kind of okay, never really spoke about it. I watched it again a few weeks ago just to refresh my memory, and I still didn't understand what the whole movie meant. So I ended up kind of looking up to see what Lars von Trier had to say about the film and I have actually kind of an interesting quote about the movie here that I'm just going to read to you. He says, truthfully, I can only say I was driven to make the film, that these images came to me and I didn't question them. I am really the wrong person to ask what the film means or why it is as it is. It is like a bit asking the chicken about the chicken soup. All right.
Which is funny because when he does his films, and this was a thing I read about him, is most of them are sequels. And he looks at them as like continuations, not necessarily character-wise or story arc in a way you would normally think of a sequel, but thematically, they're all linked in a certain specific way. So most of his films are actually trilogies, even though they've spanned out over like several years before they've been completed and done, because they're all commenting on the same theme in the same way, even though they're all vastly different films. And he looks at them as trilogies that sort of complete that thematic arc. Which is kind of different. And it's almost like he makes something and then he's not sure where it's going to go, and then he's like, okay, well, here's where this theme takes me next. Right. And then now I feel like I'm done with it. So, yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, that's what they, when I say they, I mean, that's what this movie, Antichrist, and the two movies that followed it, which was Melancholia and Nymphomaniac, they call it the Depression Trilogy. That's what I've always heard, and I mean, they're not wrong.
And Lars has said he wrote them from the aspect of dealing with depression and how people deal with them. And I get that with the Antichrist thing because of her going through therapy, and it's probably all based on the loss of her child.
Right. But then everything else that happened in between just kind of didn't make sense. I was mentioning about the deer and the fox, and there was also a crow. And I looked it up afterwards, but apparently they're supposed to represent the three beggars in Russian folklore. And I have a little note here. It says, who, like Christ, often offer wisdom and compassion through suffering. So that kind of makes sense, but I mean, out of context, if you're not really sure about that, I mean, you would never. He's
very heavy with symbolism.
Yeah.
I've noticed in his films, and a lot of it is stuff that, like, having done art history and stuff, like, you sort of pick up on different things. Like, I started remembering things from, like, art history classes and that, like, looking at stuff. And some of it I had to look up, too, like you did, right? Just to be like, well, what's this about? His style is very much in the style of, like, older surrealist filmmakers. In that, like, the things seem disconnected, but they're all there only because of the symbolism, which is, like, a heavy thing surrealists did with their work, so it seemed really disjointed and strange trying to watch. I don't know if you've seen, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's that famous one with the bugs in the box and they cut open the bull's eye. So
I know what you're talking about. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
I'm kind of terrified to watch that one.
Oh, no, that one's not bad, actually.
No?
No, you'd totally be able to. We watched that in art history class, so, like, it's not...
So? Oh,
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I've always been a little bit nervous to watch.
Which means Kim's seen it, so ask her about it.
Amazing! Kim! That's good. So the next film I want to talk about is called Melancholia, which was released in 2011, and you've seen this one.
Yes,
so
this was one of the two that I saw. And this is a good one for symbolism and remembering things from art history, because there's a lot of pre-Raphaelite nods in terms of, like, their poetry and the paintings and stuff the pre-Raphaelites did. Especially with The Lady of Shalott. That was, like, a huge... It's more so now critically looked at as a huge poem. And that painting is made reference to a lot as well.
Right. Oh.
And there's also a lot of deer and crow and symbolism and stuff in the, and like the fox that randomly runs through the golf course. And there's all that in this film as well, so that sort of links it.
I didn't catch on to
that way to the to the symbolism from the Antichrist one.
Right.
But that also fits the depression theme, especially if you're familiar with the poem and the painting. You know, that's about the woman that drowns herself, right?
Yeah. And I mean, even going back, like, Melancholia, like, the name of the movie. Like, the definition of melancholia is deep sadness or gloom. Like, that's... like, that's pretty much, that's the point. Like, that's, there's no...
And they started with a party.
Exactly, right?
Well, it really starts with a short surrealist movie.
Yes.
And so the opening credits are done over a short surrealist film that tells you everything that's going to happen in the movie through symbolism.
Yep.
And not all of it is exactly literal, but some of it is.
Yeah.
And it is the like entire ins and outs of the movie in the most condensed version possible. So he does like a mini surrealist film of it before you start.
Yeah.
And then you just sort of slowly watch everything unfold.
Exactly. Like you watch it, at first you have no concept of what exactly it is that you're looking at, but I mean, once you've seen the film and you're like, oh.
He actually did a summary of the entire movie at the beginning and told you exactly what was going to happen.
You don't even need to watch the rest of the movie. I truly recommend you do.
It's good.
Yeah. This movie stars Charlotte Gainsbourg again. She was also in Antichrist. Kirsten Dunst, Alexander Skarsgård for a very short amount of time, Stellan Skarsgård, and Kiefer Sutherland. It basically starts off as the character Kirsten Dunst and Alexander Skarsgård. They're getting married, and it's a big
It's the
party.
reception.
It's the reception, yes. And everybody's so happy, but the character Kirsten Dunst it's quite obvious that there's something else going on. You don't really know what it is.
Yeah, like she's
happy,
but she's a little off.
Yeah, and nobody really knows what it is. And she's not really spending time with her guests. She's more spending time in her room by herself, which is kind of bizarre.
She keeps trying to duck out, like the crowd is too much for her.
Yeah.
And she does try to spend time with her parents, and that doesn't exactly work out great.
No, it doesn't.
Especially near the end of the party when she's really trying to connect and like keep her father around, and she can't even seem to keep him in the picture.
No.
And throughout the party you hear her sister giving her sort of pep talks, I guess.
Yeah.
And also sort of chiding her a bit and saying, you know, you're supposed to be happy and you promised me you wouldn't do this, and I can tell there's something wrong. And this one I saw both these films not that long ago.
Right. Yeah,
I
seen them.
saw them in a short span of time as well. I'm trying to remember what are the two sisters' name? It's mostly about their relationship and how they interact with everybody else. So you first see it from one sister's perspective, the one that's getting married. It's
her name is Justine.
Justine? Okay,
Justine.
so that's Kirsten Dunst's character. Yep. And she is at her sister's place. They own a golf resort, and they're throwing her the wedding reception.
Very lavish.
Very lavish.
Everything.
Which her brother-in-law is quick to point out at every turn. He's not a bad character, especially over the course of it, and you get to know him more. You come to like him, but he's very standoffish and a bit of a douche.
Yes, he definitely comes off as
a bit
being,
abrasive, we'll say.
Almost like quite obviously annoyed at his sister-in-law's overall demeanor.
Yes.
Kind of like almost a little tired of it.
We don't know what the full story here is yet, but as we see her interact with more and more people, we start to learn just how deeply unhappy she is.
Yes.
And we start to learn that she's been hiding an entire mental history of depression. And basically because she's been hiding it so much and it's so severe and it's sort of like bubbling now, her sister is the only one that really knows, and I'm assuming brother-in-law.
Yeah.
The marriage ends that same night.
The reception, her husband walks away.
By the end of the reception,
walks away.
And walks away in such a way that they both know, like, it's just over.
And like, there's no tears, there's no argument, there's no nothing. It's just kind of like...
It's like she can't process it.
See ya.
The story starts then from her, what's meant to be her sister's perspective as the sister's focus. So you learn more and more about Claire's life and her every day, and we see her as the caregiver for her, is it older sister?
I'm not sure if she's older or younger. It's hard to tell. They don't really.
Sure.
They're really
fairly close in age.
Yeah, fairly close.
And we see that she's become so depressed that at one point, like, she doesn't do anything. She doesn't eat unless she's taken to the table.
Completely debilitated.
Yeah, she just sort of stops.
It almost looks like she's in physical pain. Like, there's a bathtub scene, I think, where she just couldn't stand up.
Yes, and her sister has to help her.
Yeah. And when she's eating at the table, like, she just starts sobbing because food tastes...
Or doesn't really have a taste.
Doesn't really have a taste. I think the fact of the matter that, you know, maybe food might be something that she always found joy in, and now the fact that it doesn't taste like anything or tastes like ashes or something, And that just sends her over the edge. She just starts sobbing. It's actually quite a sad scene, you know, if you really feel for it, like.
Yeah, and you sort of get why. I mean, he doesn't go about it or handle it the right way, but you sort of get why the brother-in-law, is it John?
I can't remember what his name is.
That's okay, I don't really remember either.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
By the brother-in-law is a bit exasperated because it's a lot to deal with when you have a family member who's struggling so hard with illness. But the sister is very good and is like, you know, the caregiver, and we see her struggles with that.
Oh, yes.
Over halfway through, because they're not short films.
No.
We're well over halfway before they mention, oh, by the way, there's this planet called Melancholia that's supposed to pass by Earth in an orbit.
Right. Yep, just passing through, and it turns into well, it's the new plot of the movie. I mean, it's just a whole new aspect of
yeah, and we're still following their lives and how they feel and how they interact with each other as a family.
Yes.
But through this new perspective of, well, maybe this planet is going to hit based on trajectory, and maybe it's not.
Right.
And it's going to pass by and everything's going to be fine.
Right. Everyone has their opinions about it, and the character of Justine ends up getting a little bit distressed by the idea of it. And she's going online and she's reading articles about it, and she's getting herself upset about it, and her husband is
trying to keep the articles away from her.
Yes, just like, oh, maybe you shouldn't be reading this. Maybe, you know, just relax, take some time. You know, don't fret over this. This is something you have no control over.
Sets up a telescope and he's like, we'll track its progress together, right, and we'll watch it, and he sort of makes a sort of more enjoyable time out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think they make a device with a coat hanger to, you put the coat hanger on your chest, and the circle is, you know, how do you explain that? Like it's some sort of device. It measures
the proximity. So like you stretch it out. Basically, it's like a kid's science project, yes, and he does it with his son. But like, you know, he gets his wife to use it, yeah, to sort of prove, because he's tracking it in scale with, yeah, the telescope, but like as a fun sort of way to do it. So that what you do is you make it a certain size. So if you always hold it at your chest from the same height and level, so it has to be the same person, right? Looking at it, the size it was a while ago, yeah, it will shrink as it gets further away. So you will see, like, it'll be visibly smaller inside the ring. Yeah.
Whereas if it were to come the other way, it would be much bigger than the ring. So.
And of course, it does start receding, the planet.
It does.
And we see more and more of the two sisters and how they interact together, and we see less and less of John around.
Yes, a lot less of John. Yeah.
He basically disappears. And she doesn't really wonder about it too much because it's only partway through the next day.
That's right. Not too much.
She's not too concerned yet. She thinks, oh, maybe he's gone to town or whatever. And then she notices slowly throughout the day that not only is John not around, but the planet is getting closer again.
Right.
So I think how they've explained this with science, and I don't know that this is possible even, but basically it started to get further away on its path, but Earth got caught up in its gravitational pull or something and is now pulling itself back closer to the planet.
Right.
And they're going to collide.
100% going to collide.
So the first thing she does when she can't, like, she's worried now that she can't find her husband, is she checks the antidepressant pills she had for her sister, which she had locked away so that her sister couldn't commit suicide.
Right.
And the bottle's still there, but she really still can't find her husband.
Right.
So she goes back and checks the bottle again and realizes it's empty.
Yeah.
It was locked back there, but empty.
Yeah. And
she finds that her husband couldn't take the idea that the world was going to end and has eaten the entire bottle.
Yeah, and they find him in the horse stables.
Or well, she does. She hides it because she doesn't want her son to know.
Right. Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah, and it just gets worse from there.
Oh, it gets more panicked and frenzied and...
Well, she does, but the other sister starts to get oddly calm.
Calm.
And okay. But she's been severely depressed this entire time anyway. So, I mean, if it's over, everything's over in the way that she was probably going to commit suicide anyway.
Right.
So she gets oddly calm and relaxed about it. But the good part about that is she's able to make a game with the little boy.
Yes.
And keep his mind off of it,
Mm-hmm.
which is very, very touching and also very heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then Justine or Claire is forced to keep it together then for her son as well. And she frantically tries to go back to civilization.
Yeah.
And can't.
Can't.
Because it's too late. And because she's trying to be with anybody. She's just trying to have some kind of moment with other people before the world ends. Because she knows it's all going to end.
Mm-hmm.
And they just end up sitting together waiting for it to happen.
Yeah.
And then it just does. Like, they're just quietly sitting there and it just does.
Yeah, it's like they're quietly sitting there, like you said, and just everything is shaking. Like, there's so much noise and everything is... Like, it's crazy, like there's electricity in the air, you can see it, and then all of a sudden, like, the screen just goes to, I think, a very bright white.
Yeah.
And that was the end.
That was it.
That was it.
The planets crashed.
Done.
And it was just done.
Yeah.
And it's weird to explain
It
as
is.
a movie.
It is.
But it's very, very intense. You're very caught up in it.
Oh, yeah.
And while there's a lot of symbolism, it's not like super heavy. It's a weird thing to follow, and it's very unsettling.
It is.
It's very unnerving in a way that you don't want to stop watching it, even way before you get to the it's a disaster film part,
Right.
because you don't know it's a disaster film until you're over halfway through it.
Exactly. And then, like, once it's all done, you're almost speechless. Like, you have no idea what to do or say. It's just...
It gets weirdly under your skin.
Yes, you think I think I thought about this movie for a good 2 days after I watched it. Actually, I did that with all of his films. I can't lie there.
There's a lot of treatment in these particular films as the Depression trilogy around mental illness.
Yep.
But like, he treats his characters very fairly, particularly his female characters.
Yeah, in all of the films that I've seen, there's been a, strong, not necessarily meaning mentally or what have you, but female character. Like, the characters themselves are very...
Strong as in they're fully fleshed out characters.
Yes, very interesting and very flawed at some points, but, like, I mean, amazing female characters. That's what I meant to say.
And they're just like everyday people.
Yes.
Which is nice to see because you don't see a lot of that.
Right.
You get very caught up in their everyday life. And as you watch it, you see the pressures that are put on them. Because there's a lot of it focuses a lot on societal pressures to be or a certain way, especially if you have mental illness.
Right.
How some of those pressures are even further unfairly put on women, especially the idea that you need to be happy or agreeable all the time.
Exactly. Especially on your wedding day.
Yeah.